Morning, everyone. We'd like to start things on time here. Not like in Albany where everything begins half an hour late. We try to keep things on time. We welcome those of you who are here on time. Before we even begin, I want to thank the people who have put this together, most notably my personnel in the Cities Committee up in Albany. They just did a tremendous job making all the calls necessary to get this together. So, Meg, we thank you, and Ashley, we thank you for getting up so early and traveling on down from Albany. There'll be a little extra in your paycheck this month. Okay, we also want to thank the Assembly Communication Tech crew, for being here and setting all this up. And lastly, we want to thank the fine people here at Einstein, the Einstein Hospital and College Complex that we're in, one of the gems of the Bronx, of which there are many, and coincidentally, mostly in my district. We thank them for their hospitality and putting this all together for us. Okay, without any further ado, let's get going. We on the Cities Committee have some serious concerns in the state of New York and about the infrastructure within this state of New York and the plight of the various cities and municipalities throughout the state in dealing with an aging infrastructure that needs to be upgraded, and possibly they don't have the resources to actually take care of those projects. Hence, we have started a series of hearings, this being the last of which, the first one beginning last week in Albany, and the cities and towns in and around Albany. We went out to Rochester last week to take care of Western New York, and we're here for the last one in the Bronx to find out the cities in the lower New York State area and New York City itself about their needs, showing complete contempt for the southern tier of our state where we have ignored, but hopefully we'll get to in the future. Maybe we'll go down to Binghamton. But at any rate, we're here today. We've heard some interesting testimony over the last week in regards to the needs of the cities, and we're looking forward to having some very interesting testimony today. Before we call up our first testifier, I want to turn the mic over to my colleague from Manhattan, who's here with me this morning, and who has expressed a tremendous interest in New York State infrastructure and New York City in particular. He represents the East Side in Manhattan, the Upper East Side. Assemblyman Robert Rodriguez. Robert?
Thank you, Chairman Benedetto, and I certainly thank the guests for being here and providing their testimony. I also want to thank Speaker Heastie in absentia for his commitment towards looking at the infrastructure of New York City and New York State and ensuring that we take the steps necessary to understand the issues that are impacting us and figuring out novel ways to explore how we make the investments and the substantial level of investment required across the various platforms of infrastructure. As I chair the subcommittee on infrastructure under corporations, and we've been looking at the investments required to bring up to date our gas pipeline infrastructure, which impacts so many of us across the state, particularly those that are aging and gas leak prone. And as we explore the needs around transportation, water, sewer, and the needs of our municipalities, I thank the chairman for, again, convening this hearing and beginning to delve into the significant needs of our state and really beginning to put forward policies on how we advance and address those needs. Thank you.
Robert, thank you very much. I hope you all realize just what happened here, okay? And this is the difference between the young, bright individual on my left and this old guy up here, okay? He had the presence of mind to thank the speaker, Speaker Hasty. Me, I left him out. Okay, a terrible omission, and I apologize, Carl, but he's kind of used to that. Thank you very much. Last thing before we actually begin, okay, I've been saying this at all the meetings, okay, I have a committee meeting room up in Albany that's kind of bare because I want posters from around the state of our cities. There are 62 of them, and I only have about 5 posters from cities. So if the city of Mount Vernon and New Rochelle and Newburgh and even New York City have some extra posters hanging around, send them to me. We'll frame them and hang them up so we can be proud of our cities. And just between you guys, there might be an extra million or so in the budget, okay, if you are real nice to us on that. But that's no promises. Okay, we're going to begin with the mayor of the great city of New Rochelle, a city that I'm kind of familiar with. I did my my undergraduate work there at Iona College, one of the gems of New Rochelle, and the Honorable Mayor of New Rochelle, Noam Bramson, okay, who I first got to know back when he was a staffer on Congresswoman Nita Lowey's staff. So welcome, Mayor Bramson, and just press the button in front of you to activate your... They're on?
Okay.
Okay, those are on.
Great.
Okay, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for that introduction, and Iona College and New Rochelle are proud of all that you have accomplished. We also applaud your commitment to punctuality, and let me tell you, at that rate, we're happy to provide you with 10 posters of the city of New Rochelle. I'm sure the other cities that are represented here would feel exactly the same, and certainly I thank you, and I thank you, Assemblyman Rodriguez, for the opportunity to speak with you about New York State's infrastructure. My name is Noam Bramson. I'm the mayor of New Rochelle, the 7th largest city in New York. And as you know, in both state and municipal budgets, we all strive to balance competing needs and priorities. And with limited resources, these choices are never easy. However, it is my strong belief, based on 20 years in city leadership, that infrastructure is the category of investment that is most severely and chronically underfunded, with the biggest gap between what we actually do and what we need to do. Furthermore, this enormous investment shortfall has serious long-term consequences for the economic vitality, competitiveness, safety, and quality of life in New York. Let me give you just a few examples from my city, and I offer these confident that New Rochelle's experience is typical. Roads. There are approximately 161 centerline miles of roadway in New Rochelle. During the past 13 years, the overall condition of our roads has deteriorated from a B to a C rating. At current funding levels, which are linked to our CHIPS allocation, road conditions will become untenable in 5 to 8 years. The cost of restoring our road network to a B+ or A- condition is estimated to be $25 to $42 million. Sewers. New Rochelle has a 192-mile sanitary sewer system and an 87-mile storm drain system. The pipes are typically more than 80 years old and are composed of vitrified clay and mortar joints, subject to cracks, holes, misalignments, and other problems that lead to inflow and infiltration. We estimate that a quarter of the system needs repair, with a rough cost of $20 million. Municipal buildings. New Rochelle maintains about 40 public buildings, some of which are more than a century old, yet with functions that remain vital in the modern day. For example, 3 of our 5 firehouses are more than 90 years old and are becoming obsolete because of the increased size and weight of equipment. Meanwhile, our public works yard is aging badly and presently located on the waterfront, where it impedes economic and environmental progress. The cost to modernize and maintain our public buildings is estimated to be $60 to $90 million. Traffic management. As New Rochelle grows and develops, our infrastructure needs to keep pace, including traffic control systems. We presently use 50-year-old mechanically timed controllers. Upgrading to a synchronized computer control system to preserve service levels and reduce emissions will cost approximately $30 million. And vehicles and equipment. The average vehicle in our municipal fleet is more than 10 years old, much higher than the recommended 4 to 7 years. Because of inadequate replacement cycles, our aging fleet experiences higher than normal maintenance costs, lower fuel economy, and reduced reliability. Modernizing the city fleet would cost about $25 million. Add up just these examples, and you have a total infrastructure and capital price tag of as much as $200 million. And what is our annual capital budget in New Rochelle? Well, including all sources of outside assistance, all federal and state grants, our capital budget is usually around $5 million. As I said earlier, this is where the gap between actual investment and needed investment is largest and most problematic. And of course, I've spoken almost entirely about maintaining existing infrastructure, barely even touching on the question of improvements. The redesign of roads to accommodate multimodal transportation, the expansion of infrastructure to support smart growth and job creation, the spectrum of investments that are associated with sustainability and climate resiliency, as well as the park and playground enhancements that make a community livable. We all know that this challenge is too big to address fully within current and foreseeable resource constraints. But there are realistic steps that the state could take to make things much better. I'll suggest just 3. First, of course, comes the obligatory shaking of the tin cup. Like every other municipal official, I urge you in the strongest terms to increase funding for both AIM and CHIPS. As NICOM has detailed on many occasions, these programs have not kept pace with inflation and represent only a minuscule fraction of the much larger grants that flow deservedly to our schools. Cities need help, and these 2 programs offer the easiest and most direct means of providing that help. Second, you could establish better guidelines for the transportation dollars that already flow through MPOs like NIMTIC. At present, these dollars are not always linked to the state's planning goals, which emphasize sustainable, transit-oriented growth, nor are they always linked to payback in the form of tax-producing economic development. Establishing better guidelines would help ensure that every transportation infrastructure dollar is devoted to the highest and best use, and that future investment is paid for through a growing economy. Finally, if you cannot send us help, then at least allow us to help ourselves. Amend the tax cap formula to exclude capital costs. This would enable municipalities to make intelligent, long-term decisions about infrastructure investment without defunding our fire, police, and sanitation services. This would benefit taxpayers, too, by providing for economic growth, new commercial tax revenue, and higher property values. And remember, if the residents of our cities aren't satisfied with how we use that authority, they can hold us directly accountable. By taking these steps, you can put New York State and its cities on a better, more sustainable path. You can do right by those whom we serve in the present, and also by those who will judge our actions in the future. Thank you for receiving my comments. I wish you wisdom and success in your work.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Before I ask you a couple questions, I want to acknowledge the presence of another one of my colleagues who has come here today from Manhattan, from Upper Manhattan, Washington Heights, Assemblyman Guillermo Linares. Thank you, Guillermo, and we'll bring it over to you in a second. Mr. Mayor, you have echoed the concerns of many of the mayors and city managers who have appeared before us. $200 million is a nice chunk of change. You have mentioned the possibility that we should look at increasing the AIM allocation, which, if I'm correct, has basically been flat over the last 4 or 5 years or so.
That is correct.
The governor has inserted in his budget also some incentives for competitions to different localities if they would consolidate, improve the way they run government, and so on. We are, just to let you know, recommending in the assembly budget that we eliminate all those other competitions, and we want to add about, if I remember correctly, $289 million to the AIM program for the different municipalities. So we have heard, and we are trying, to get there. In the future, it would seem to me that out of a budget of, let's say, $150 million, if we would just allocate 1% of that budget, and if my computations are correct, 1% would amount to about $1.5 billion. That would almost double the amount that's allocated right now. Would you think statutorily we should do something like this going forward to give the cities basically some hope for the future?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I certainly appreciate the spirit of the question. I appreciate your leadership on this issue. I wouldn't presume to tell you the exact amount that should be allocated. You have to weigh that against the overall composition of the state budget. But certainly, I would support a substantial increase. For all the reasons I mentioned earlier, there is an urgent need for this. And also because I believe infrastructure, more than almost anything else, contributes to economic growth. It pays for itself in a way that many other forms of public expenditure do not. And really, the only way to break out of the zero-sum game that we often confront when we're trying to choose among all the different priorities that face us at the local and state level is to achieve that kind of growth, to have a larger pie that's spinning off revenue for all the things we need, including tax relief. And our failure to invest in infrastructure, I think, is getting in the way of sensible growth policies that can make New York State more competitive and can provide a bigger tax base both to cities and to the state itself. So I think the priority you've identified is absolutely in line with what we in cities would hope and expect to see out of the state.
One more question before I turn it over to my colleagues. One of the governor's ideas has to do with the core city and developing the core city, encouraging economic growth, which in turn would encourage and grow the tax base, which in turn will give all the individual cities more money to put into projects such as yours. Would you agree with the governor in that particular area?
I do, and I've read about the governor's initiative to assist distressed cities, and I think that the spirit of the governor's suggestion is right on target. There are many cities that have the bones to be enormously successful. Transit access, compact, walkable downtowns, and yet for a variety of historical reasons have come upon hard times. So a state partnership to help achieve the potential of those communities would be enormously helpful. Now, of course, the devil is in the detail. So we are looking forward to understanding more fully what the program criteria are, what the eligibility standards will be, and exactly how probable it is that one community or another will be able to access that state assistance. So I think that is a positive step, but I would not regard that as a substitute for the baseline essential investment partnership that needs to exist between states and localities in order to take care of basic infrastructure needs. I think those two things ought to be pursued together, not one or the other.
But and correct me if I'm wrong, okay? But knowing New Rochelle like I know New Rochelle, New Rochelle, at least to my mind, looked like a distressed city some 10, 15 years ago. It does not appear to be that way anymore. With the inner city, the new buildings that have been put up, the new structure for your railway station, it looks like a project, just like the governor's been talking about, has helped New Rochelle tremendously. Am I right in that assumption?
Well, I appreciate the kind word. I should bring you along with me on the campaign trail to share that opinion with others. What I say about New Rochelle is that we've come a long way, and we still have a long way to go. There's no doubt that there have been significant improvements and investments in the last 15 to 20 years, successful public-private partnerships, but we have not come anywhere close to achieving our potential. We don't have the balance of uses we'd like to see in our downtown. There are still significant pockets of economic distress, which impact many residents. There are still many people who feel that our downtown does not offer the spectrum of goods and services that would be appealing to our entire population and to our entire region. And we were speaking earlier about the broad needs of the metropolitan area. And the truth is, unless communities like New Rochelle, and Mount Vernon, and Yonkers, and White Plains, unless we succeed, the New York metropolitan area cannot succeed, because the 5 boroughs alone cannot absorb the level of growth and job creation necessary for New York to compete in the global marketplace. So our success will be a success that is shared broadly by everyone in New York.
Point well taken. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Robert?
Mr. Mayor, I guess if you were thinking about how you could potentially expand your capital budget and just looking at needs, $200 million, $5 million a year, even over 30 years, you don't get to do half, maybe 3/4 of the projects that you're looking at now. So in your estimation, what would be able to help facilitate the increase in your capital investment Is it just the property tax? Is it a bump in AIM or CHIPS? Or, you know, I'm sure you're tackling this, you know, daily to figure out how to get more done.
Well, as I said, we recognize it's not a problem that can be solved fully, but it's one that can be made better through good policy making. So I would say our first priority, of course, would be anything that concerns public safety. That has to come first in line. And the second test I would apply is one that I mentioned in response to the question. Is there a payback associated with it? Are there steps we can take that contribute to growth and therefore make it easier for us to undertake all the other priorities at some future date? So that's how I would prioritize our infrastructure needs. And, you know, my goodness, if we were to have the opportunity to increase our annual capital budget from about $5 million, which it is today, to something closer to $10 million, that would make an enormous difference in the pace with which we're tackling things and the speed of our economic growth efforts. Look, it won't surprise you to learn that we'd much rather have that in the form of AIM or CHIPS or some other form of state support than raise it in property taxes. But having the flexibility to consider property taxes would be helpful as we try to make balanced long-term judgments. And I also believe it's something that many people in New Rochelle would consider themselves because they understand that there is a payback and there's a receipt that we get in the form of value when we make investments in infrastructure that we all feel and experience on a daily basis.
Thank you.
Assemblyman Linares, and if you want to take a little extra time to make a statement before you ask any questions, by all means do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it on? Okay,
Yeah,
good. Thank you. It was a little hard getting here in time, looking for parking first and then looking for the building. But I'm glad to know that we're holding this hearing, particularly at this time when we see most of our municipalities across the state, particularly New York City, growing in population and also being challenged with its infrastructure, surface and under the surface in particular. And it presents long-term challenges, fiscally in particular, but also puts us in a situation with deteriorating infrastructure where we're mostly reacting whenever something bursts or whenever another calamity happens. And I think it's an opportunity for us to look with the expertise that we have across the major cities in a state, starting with New York City, obviously with a high concentration and challenges, multiple challenges that it has in terms of infrastructure, to look at a long-term plan that allow us to be able to allocate the appropriate resources and at the same time meet the demands, the growing demands that we have. So when we have to think of the social needs and the priorities that are for the population, obviously those are priorities that we have to address. And usually we leave for second place the infrastructure needs that we have. And yet we couldn't really see growth or development without really tending to that. So I understand the importance of this. My question, I guess, to you, Mr. Mayor, having heard part of your testimony, is, what have you observed in your experts in your city that represents the greatest challenge when you have to prioritize on infrastructure that you know is important and critical for growth and development, and reconcile that with the basic needs and priorities that you have, in particular with the limitations in funding, particularly in the federal level. So you're left to look and survive with whatever you can bring with your locality and whatever can come from the state?
It's, I think, a very well-phrased question, Assemblyperson, and I thank you for it. And I think you made an excellent point. It's the nature of things that the needs of the present always crowd out the needs of tomorrow, even if those needs of tomorrow might, in fact, be of greater importance to the health and vitality of a community. And we all know our actions are going to be judged by our children and grandchildren, and we ought to do right by them. But when you are faced with a choice of having an adequate number of firefighters on duty at any given time, having an adequate number of police officers able to patrol your community, or filling a pothole, the first two might necessarily come ahead in line. And yet we've got to find a way to carve out greater attention for infrastructure. Otherwise, we're going to continue with this vicious cycle in which our economy deteriorates, spins off less income, and we have less capacity to do anything. So as I said before, what we try to prioritize are safety issues first, and then investments that can lead to future growth. I mean, just to take off one example that I referenced briefly in my comments, our Public Works Yard, our operations center, is right now located on the Long Island Sound shore, 6 acres on the Long Island Sound shore. And that reflects the good judgments made a century ago when we thought of the waterfront as an industrial access point. Today, never in a million years would we put a Public Works Yard on the shoreline because we recognize it can be used for a higher and better use. And yet, relocating the Public Works Yard will be a costly undertaking for New Rochelle, particularly in a fully built-out community where there's no ideal location. It has to be sort of shoehorned in. Doing it properly, though, would be enormously beneficial to our economy and enormously beneficial to our quality of life. And so it's my opinion that we need to find a way to proceed. It would be foolish for us not to. But having a stronger partnership with the state, recognizing that there are common local and state interests in taking steps like this, would greatly enhance the prospects of success. And that's why I'm delighted to hear the commitment that each of you have expressed, and I know you speak for many of your colleagues. So we know that we have friends in Albany, and I hope we can work together to accomplish the goals we all share.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for your testimony, coming on down from New Rochelle, even though I know it's only about a 20-minute run. But we appreciate you being here. Your testimony was very enlightening. We really appreciate that, and hopefully we're going to be doing something with it.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman.
you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Oh, that's the old one. I apologize. There was a correction.
Yes. Oh, she's not here. Oh, okay, okay, good. Of course, he's not here. Thank you, folks, for waiting. Next, we want to introduce the mayor, who has come down from the city of Newburgh, traveling, I guess, about an hour and 20 minutes or so, depending upon how fast she drove. The Honorable Judy Kennedy. Madam Mayor. Thank you for being here, and begin your testimony as you wish.